Okay, so the last time we were together, I left you at this place. The pale blue dot. If you weren't with us last time, we did a meditation and a reflection on Carl Sagan's, and I called him Saint Carl. He probably would not like that necessarily, but he is a hallowed individual who gave to us so much in his span of 50 or 60 years, whatever it was. And one of the more important contributions in my mind was his meditation on the pale blue dot. And today's theme, I have in mind that we'll have a conversation about the connection between spirituality and science, just building on where we were last time. Remember last time we had all kinds of images on the screen after the pale blue dot. We had a dazzle of zebras, a kaleidoscope of butterflies, a pride of lions, a tower of giraffes, all those collective nouns. I love them. They're so playful. And today we come back to the pale blue dot and we interrogate this pale blue dot and we ask, is it possible that there's a connection between science and spirituality? Part of the Unitarian Universalist tradition is to seek the truth from wherever it comes, to have a sense of commitment to the interrelatedness of all creation, and a free-minded commitment to scientific truth. And so the question that I have, is there a connection between science and spirituality? And let's go back to St. Carl. Science is not only compatible with spirituality, it's a profound source of spirituality. He goes on, when we recognize our place in an immensity of light years and in the passage of ages, when we grasp the intricacy, beauty, and subtlety of life, then that soaring feeling, that sense of elation and humility combined, is surely spiritual. The notion that science and spirituality are somehow mutually exclusive does a disservice to both. I think that makes sense. In the news this past week, how many of you saw that Captain Kirk went into space? That was something else, wasn't it? 90-year-old Captain Kirk leaves the Earth's foundation. He goes into orbit around the Earth. 90-year-old William Shatner. So I wish my sister were here today, because she can't stand William Shatner. And oftentimes when I want to get a rise out of her, I'll send her a picture of him, smiling or, shaking his head. And she doesn't like William Shatner because I grew up in Gaffney. My family grew up in Gaffney. She did too. And so every year, some of you may know this, there's a Peach Festival parade through Gaffney. And they always reach out to get some amazing parade person to ride the back of the parade. And one year, we brought William Shatner. And so he rode in the parade, sitting on the back of a convertible, waving to everybody, collected his $15,000. And the next night was on, I guess it was Johnny Carson, maybe it was David Letterman, talking about this hick town that he'd just been in. But I'm a forgiveness teacher. I can't hold it against him. And he's actually kind of right. But William Shatner goes up on Blue Origin. Now, I'm going to ask you to kind of set aside the moral conundrum that probably all of us feel about billionaires spending money on their pet projects, taking a handful of people into space when there's so much other stuff they could be doing with that money. I just want to mention that at the outset. Let's set it on the table here. I'm not letting them off the hook for that, but I want to just focus on another aspect of it. So here's William Shatner. He goes up in Blue Origin, and he is overwhelmed, absolutely overwhelmed. Did any of you see the interviews that he gave? Incredible, right? Yeah. He said, "I'm so filled with emotion about what just happened. It's extraordinary, really, extraordinary. I hope I can maintain what I feel now. I don't want to lose it. It's so much larger than me and life." Shatner continued, "I mean the little things, the weightlessness, and to see the blue color whip by, and now you're staring into blackness. That's the thing. This covering of blue is this sheet, this blanket, this comforter of blue around us that we have around us. We think, oh, that's blue sky. But then suddenly you shoot through all of it, all of a sudden, like you whip a sheet off of you when you sleep. And you're looking into blackness. And you look down and there's blue down there, and the black up here. And there is Mother Earth and comfort. Mother Earth and comfort." And then he spoke. I didn't see this in so many of the interviews that were posted, but I did see one reference to his sadness when he came down. His sadness was overwhelming. He was sad because of the precious nature of what he saw. He called a blue pillow the atmosphere that gives us the comfort of home. And he said that everyone should have an opportunity to see this, because once we see it, we truly will act to preserve it, to save it, to be mindful of our connection to creation, and do something about the environmental degradation that's happening now. To behold with awe and wonder this fragile earth, our island home, and then find within us the creativity and perseverance to do something about it. That's a spiritual dimension. And there's one really important connection between spirituality and science. I don't need to dwell on the never-ending climate catastrophe that's going on now, but just a couple of shots. Oh, here's the blue. So beautiful, isn't it? Captain Kirk is thinking about this, and it makes him sad, because he sees the blackness of space as so much larger. And this little band of blue makes our lives possible. This little band of blue is give or take 50 miles, and they went through it in seconds. So, decline in biodiversity, fires in California, water crisis of a different sort. This is Germany. St. Greta, this young woman, brings us all to the question, how do we connect science with our spirituality to save this wonderful, beautiful planet we live on? How do we connect the dots so that we preserve it and we work towards taking care of the environmental degradation that humanity has caused? How do we do that? How do we preserve this planet for our children, our grandchildren? You know, one of the sadnesses that I have is that my grandchildren won't be able to grow up and snorkel on coral reefs and see what I've seen in my life. Something that brings me such joy and delight. We can't give up hope, though. You know, a couple of years back, I wrote an article for an undisclosed newspaper in the area on finding hope in challenging times. I sought to address how we acknowledge and grieve our losses, ground ourselves in breath, beauty, and meditation, and then mobilize ourselves for the fight of our lives. But after I submitted the article, I got a reply from the editor that he would not be publishing my article because climate change is a matter of opinion, not fact. And he would not subject his readers to the kind of fear-mongering I had produced. I was floored. We've got more work to do than I thought. I continue to be shocked by the polarization we have in our world today, in our nation, where people of all sides can look at the same set of facts and come up with such differing opinions about them. Hate is on the rise, and we've created a culture of contempt. I want to talk a little bit about this disease, the catastrophic spiritual disease of contempt. Arthur Brooks wrote a book a few years back called Love Your Enemies. And he writes that there's a categorical difference between anger and contempt. Anger, he writes, is an emotion that occurs when we want to change someone's behavior and believe we can do so. Consider a fight with your spouse or a friend. If you were upset and got angry, was your goal to push her out of your life entirely? Of course not. Anger at least engages. Contempt, on the other hand, attempts to mock, shame, and permanently exclude from relationships by belittling, humiliating, and ignoring. Mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa. If you guys have had any feelings like this, especially under our previous president, it's time to confess it and get healed of this. My job today, however, is not to take us on a dreary path towards despair or to dwell in that contempt, but to invite you to do something about it, to enkindle a little bit of hope, the spiritual muscle of hope. So what is our case for hope today? In light of the need to build a bridge across this gargantuan divide in our hyper-polarized environment politically, in light of the need to make tough decisions about protecting the future life on the planet for our grandchildren, what are we to do? There's a writer that I really love, and maybe at some point we'll do a book study on one of his books. His name is Charles Eisenstein. Has anyone heard of Charles Eisenstein? It's like Einstein, but it's got an N. Yeah, okay, Terry, thank you. Yeah, I did a book study for a group in Hendersonville right after I moved to town about 6 years ago. And the book, to me, says it all. It's a beautiful title. It says, the title of the book is The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know is Possible. It's incredible. Eisenstein says that threats of global catastrophe don't move people to action. And that's true, isn't it? I mean, we can watch this on the news all day long, but it doesn't seem like it takes root. It doesn't seem like we do anything about it. He says only the heart can inspire zeal for transformation. So it's not the data, it's the story. It's not the hard facts, but it's the reality of how those challenges connect with us individually and as communities. Stories become a way to connect, even with those whom we disagree. Eisenstein says the biggest challenge for us right now is not that we need more science, but that we need a better story. We need a bigger story. A bigger story that includes all of us, even those people who would exclude us from their story, their circle. Our hope is what makes this possible. Another book. Sorry about all the quotations today, but I get on a roll. Victoria Safford writes in her book, The Impossible Will Take a Little While. That's the name of her book. She writes, our mission is to plant ourselves at the gates of hope, not the prudent gates of optimism, which are somewhat narrower, but the stalwart, boring gates of common sense, nor the strident gates of self-righteousness, which creak and shrill and on angry hinges, and not the cheerful, flimsy garden gate of everything's going to be all right, but a very different, sometimes very lonely place, the place of truth-telling about your own soul first and its condition, the place of resistance and defiance, the piece of ground from which you see the world, both as it is and as it could be. we need to plant ourselves at the gate of hope. Hope is the spiritual healing balm that will get us through our challenges, the challenges of contempt, and help us on to the next phase of our journey. This hope is a belief that we can draw a circle that will bring all of us in, because forbid that we perish, we're all going to perish together. Whether you're a supporter of this politician or that politician. And not to realize that is like being in a rowboat and finding that it has sprung a leak on the other side, and you say, well, at least it's on his side, not mine. I mean, I've done that before. Hope, active hope. One of the best writers on this subject is Joanna Macy. She's Buddhist, and Active Hope is such a powerful book. I can't recommend it any higher. It was a game changer for me, and it gave me hope, and it gave me peace. She says that active hope is not wishful thinking. Active hope is not wanting to be rescued by some savior. Active hope is waking up to the beauty of life on whose behalf we can act. We belong to this world. The web of life is calling us forth at this time. We've come a long way, and it's time for us to play our part. Wow. So we start with a pale blue dot, make a quick journey through the environmental catastrophes where we find ourselves today, and I'm trying to plant a seed of hope that I hope will grow in your heart and my heart. And Joanna Macy is a wonderful gardener of hope. One of the signs of hope for me is a community called the Transition Movement. Transition Movement is born out of something called permaculture. And there are transition movements in a lot of cities around the country, around the world. It was started in Totnes, England in 2006. It's a beautiful movement. They give me so much hope. Like, for example, their first book that they published was, get the title right, The Power of Just Doing Stuff. You know, we can be paralyzed, we can be depressed, we can be overwhelmed. But then if we get out and do some stuff, we actually see some progress. Their podcast, and I was telling Jim about it this past week, their podcast says it all to me. The title of the podcast is, What Could Possibly Go Right? It gives me hope. Transition Movement believes that if we wait for governments, it'll be too little too late. If we act as individuals, it will be too little. But if we act as communities, it might just be enough, just in time. If we act as communities, where we check our contempt at the door, we find our hope, and we make a plan to move forward. So, sometimes I feel overwhelmed when I read the news, and I'm an avid reader of collapse literature. For those of you who know what that is, it's about how all the ancient societies have collapsed, and my brain is working. Is this happening now? Is this what's going on now? Jared Diamond's written several books in that genre of literature, and it can be overwhelming. And if you pay attention, it can be overwhelming. So, what do I do to find hope? What do I do to find peace? Well, I love poets, and the poet Wendell Berry wrote this poem, The Peace of Wild Things, and I'll share this with you. And then I'd like for us to have a conversation at the end of our service about this, because I want to hear what brings you hope, what gives you joy, what inspires you to action. Wendell Berry, The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world, and I am free. Wendell Berry's Peace of Wild Things. Okay, we have a beautiful song now to kind of be the punctuation mark and to embody what I tried to convey today. So I'll ask Terry and Kathy to come forward. What a wonderful world. I feel a lot of love in my heart. I'm grateful for that. Okay, as we extinguish the flame, let us say together, we extinguish the flame of this chalice. Let us follow the light of truth until we meet again. Okay, what do you say? I've got to share my thoughts. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Yes, Ellen?
Back in 1984, I stopped living an ordinary life and started living an extraordinary life.
All right.
Quit my job with the National Wildlife Federation, and I began vigiling in front of the White House for global nuclear weapons abolition.
Yeah.
And I did that for 18 years. And it was challenging and exciting and fascinating, and I learned patience. And I learned, I was born to hope. That was my purpose for being born, I believe. And we just kept coming up with ideas of how to communicate with people about not just the dangers, but also the solutions.
Yeah.
And eventually what evolved was a voter initiative that we took to the voters of Washington, D.C. in 1993 and won the election with 56% of the vote.
Wow.
We surprised them with it, otherwise the media would have ruined it, but it was a surprise. And as a result, Eleanor Holmes Norton, who was a new congresswoman at the time, introduced a bill called the Nuclear Disarmament and Economic Conversion Act back in 1994. It is now the Nuclear Weapons Abolition and Economic and Energy Conversion Act, because it became clear to us that we needed to address the issue of nuclear power as well as nuclear weapons, because nuclear power creates nuclear weapons material. And so it's been introduced 15 times now. This session we have 7 co-sponsors. It's H.R. 2850. And the thing that's important about it is that it is a message of solution, because it asks the United States government, number one, to enter into a binding treaty with other nuclear weapons states, but also to support the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons that we now have 56 co-sponsors or ratifications from around the world.
Nice.
And to use the money saved to transform the arms industries to mass-producing carbon-free, nuclear-free energy, and to provide for other human needs. So this takes the money out of weapons and puts it into the Green New Deal, you know.
Yeah.
And so my work of hope is to continue to tell people about this in every way that I know, and I use social media, and I'm on the board of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, which has adopted the idea and is pushing it. One of the things that people are doing is trying to get their mayors to sign on to Mayors for Peace, and city councils to endorse the Back from the Brink resolution. And we need to reach out to the people who have the power. If we wait for the people who have the power to do it, it's not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
We can't necessarily get elected, but we can definitely tell them what we think. And so if the UU wants to do something together, I would be thrilled to work with everybody on this.
I think that'd be a great resolution for us to take up as a board and as a fellowship. Thank you for that. Thank you for keeping that hope alive for 18 years.
Well, I'm still keeping it alive, and that was 1984. So
Oh boy, okay.
37 years.
37 years. Mazel tov. Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, Barb.
Along that line, my small congregation in Michigan, where I was for a number of years, voted and declared, and we had a plaque saying so, that we were a nuclear-free zone.
I love that.
And we could do that.
We could do that. We could get David to design a whimsical world plaque for them. That'd be kind of a nice touch. I love that. Yeah. Thank you. Lots of things we can do. And you know, I heard a guy speaking at I used to live in New York, so I was always at some protest or another, you know. And I forget who it was, but the guy was talking. He said, you know, we don't have that many people out here, and it may not be the case that our protest changes things, but it keeps them from changing us. And I think that's a beautiful energy to keep in mind, too. We protest, we stand, so that we're not ourselves changed. And, you know, in the ways of all the nuclear power and all that. What else? Anybody have something to share? Yes, Marie.
In a very smaller way, I think in your local voice, get involved with the children, make them realize that this world around is beautiful. They have been in COVID stand and staying home and going with their DVDs and whatever. When you have grandchildren or people you know are children and you can relate to them, make them realize that, you know, just looking at trees, how many different leaves do you have?
Yeah.
Is a grass just one grass blade? How many different grass? Make them use their eyes to realize that this world is wonderful and beautiful, and that they are part of it, and it is it is a wonderful experience to be alive.
Yeah.
So they can become aware of the world surrounding them is so precious, because it is so amazingly different. I mean, how many different flowers do you have? I mean,
Right.
just that. I mean, I remember the head of the biology department in FSU, who was a very religious, spiritual man. He said, the more, I was not, he said, but the more I studied biology and
Yeah.
just looking at the flower, I just said, how could I not
Yeah.
become spiritual?
That's
And I
into
think
awe
that's-
and wonder. Yeah.
Yes, make people understand the wonder of living, and to me, that is the first step.
That's a beautiful observation, and that goes beyond the contempt of us trying to battle out ideas and all that. It invites people into a story, a new story of beauty, and not of good versus evil or bad guys and good guys, but look at the beauty of the flower, look at the beauty of the trees. I like that. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, John.
I won't make a reference to any particular people other than the person who just spoke. Took it upon herself to organize a small group of painters to redo the Love, Peace, and Hope sign that's at the intersection of 108 and 176 in Tryon. It's been there for years, and now it looks like a brand new sign, and it's just a reaffirmation of these very good thoughts. And
What a great observation, John. Thank you. Wow. I drove right by it. I'm going to be looking for it all the way home. Thank
Is
you.
it the one that just says peace?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Love that.
yeah.
Anything else? Yes.
I wanted to say about Charles Eisenstein, just again, what a beautiful writer he is. And one of the things that he says in that book that really jumps out to me is in terms of working to change the story, that we can all do it. And it happens in the little tiniest ways. Like, Terry, when you read that message from Marianne Williamson, that's sort of like that, you know, when somebody says something like that. Or yesterday, we were at Nanli's service, and her daughter-in-law passed out a basket of her scarves.
Yeah.
You know, at a time when you would think people would be sort of holding
Yeah.
things close, she was giving them away. They smelled like Nanli's.
Yeah.
And there was a day not too long ago, you know, when it was raining, and I was coming out of the grocery store, and I had some sort of T-shirt with some sort of progressive message on it. I can't remember what it was now. But I saw somebody coming, running through the rain with a message that was very different than one I would endorse. And so I ran over and put my umbrella over him. And just, you know, he looked at me and said, I don't know you. You don't even know me, and you're doing this. And I said, yes, I am. You know, and we talked for a minute, and I thought, you know, just little things like that.
Yeah.
Sort of changing the story. The thing that Eisenstein says is that if you can get a person to walk away and say, that's not what I expected,
Yeah.
that you're changing it.
Changing the story by those wonderful little surprises. Yeah. Love that. Who was it? We heard someone speak recently about how much she loved to go through the drive-thru at Starbucks and pay for the person behind her. Can you imagine going up to get your drink order at Starbucks and it's on the house, that person paid it, you go, what? And paying it forward. That's such a beautiful thing. Yeah. Well, okay, let's have some juice and visit with one another.